weekend's But Why fight coming up on 10 days notice, replacing one Hussein Ashkabov. Where is he, Matt? I don't know. We have Westin Wilson representing one upstate karate. And Westin Wilson, one of those guys, if you watch him fight, it's kind of like Jerry West if you melted him. Like if he was a crayon and you melted him. Because he trains primarily with Wonderboy Thompson. And he looks like a silhouette of Wonderboy Thompson if you turn the sliders down a little bit. But for Westin Wilson, you'll see it on the screens that'll go through. I mean, 16-7, 11 of his wins by submission. He strikes like an absolute wild man, like Joanderson Brito, but he loves to really try and land a kick and then off his kick, grab your leg and take you down to the mat.
And I'm so happy you bring it up this way, so let's just jump right into it. That's the weird thing about a guy like Westin Wilson. And first of all, his name belongs in like the Wild West with a big badge on and an old-timey mustache. Like, that's Westin Wilson's territory. You won't stay away from there. But he doesn't really fight like you'd assume when you just look at him standing in the middle of the cage. Because when you do see that silhouette of him, you do assume that it is going to be very footwork heavy, very kick heavy with a lot of that flash. But he is much more willing to invite that brawl than you would really assume.
I mean, if you woke up in the morning and your eyes aren't quite right and you're getting out of sleep and you see Westin Wilson, you go, is that Will Chope? Like, is that... Because he's one of those guys, 6'1". I don't know how he makes featherweight. His last time out was a catchweight bout at 150 pounds. He beat an 8-5 fighter, and that's where I'm going to end up going with the video. But when I first heard that this matchup was announced, and it was announced by an organization that, quite frankly, I might not have necessarily heard of. But if you do look at this one... I mean, I saw Sean Bitter send the tweet out there, and he was so down on this one, and then that sent me into a spiral of a rabbit hole, because Sean Bitter is the prospect whisperer, and if he says that Westin Wilson might not be that guy, I go, okay, well, how is he not that guy? So I looked at Wilson's record, and I added it up. Now, again, records are for DJs, but number on a page, combined opponent record for Westin Wilson, he's 16-7, it's 132, 145 and 3. Of his wins, the combined opponent record is 72 and 99. Of his losses, 60, 46 and 3. Westin Wilson has not beaten very good fighters, and names on a page, there's not names that have fought in big organizations that he's beaten.
And that's been the thing about Wilson. When you do look at a lot of the fight tape, I think there are a lot of positives that you can take away from it. I know initially I was really impressed by his ability to take the back of his opponents. He's really good once he is able to get it into some more of those scramble-based positions, because yes, he can get held down by sort of superior grapplers. He can get out-wrestled sometimes, and that's the thing about Wilson. He can get out-muscled sometimes because his offensive submissions are great. He can kind of get that Spider-Man type thing where he'll wrap up his opponent and threaten with a lot of different positions. But on the flip side, if he gets held down, it's really difficult for him to start sweeping his opponent off his back. He really does need that top position, and that's where I think this fight against Brito is going to be so insane, because if Brito stands in the inside and throws bombs, well, we know how powerful Joanderson Brito is. Like, this guy has absurd power, but he is great with his own submissions. He can go for scrambles, and he's somebody who, I will say this, I think Joanderson Brito is a more skilled fighter than Westin Wilson. He could probably beat guys who are higher up in the division than Westin Wilson can, but he also fights in an erratic manner that leaves the window, maybe the window is only a centimeter open right now, but the way that Joanderson Brito likes to fight leaves that window maybe 2 times open, 3 times open, because he can get a little ahead of himself. He does wing power shots. He's not this great technician on the inside. And I think for those reasons, Westin Wilson could land one of those awkward power shots, because he is a guy who's comfortable in the pocket.
Yeah, Westin Wilson's last 3 wins over 9-19 Marcus Andrusia. Mike Wilson, who was 4-3, was able to hit and take down Westin Wilson. And Fabricio Franco was 8-5. And if you go back and you watch the last fight that Wilson had with Tough Enough, I thought Macho Man Randy Savage, are you alive? Is that Bonesaw? No, it was Don Fry commentating the fights. And if you go back and you watch Westin Wilson fight a long in the tooth, but not short on experience, Teruto Ishihara, or as Jessica Rose Clark calls him the entire time, Tarut. In that one, Wilson is trying to be like Modestas Bukauskas. He's striking on the outside. He's really landing on Ishihara, but following him, because Wilson doesn't really cut off the cage. And in that one, Ishihara decides, screw that, I'm going to stand in front of him, land a left hand, and Wilson falls like a sack of potatoes, and that's the end of the fight. So for Wilson, it has been the fact that when he's fought some better fighters, he's lost. When he's fought the lesser competition, he's won. And he reminds me of Brandon Jenkins, who made a UFC debut not that long ago. Carl Deaton, who ended up fighting in the UFC not that long ago against Joe Selecki. Guys that have had really extensive careers as pros on the regional scene in the UFC, and then they get a shot in the UFC in this one. Joanderson Brito, to get back to it, I mean, he fought Chippe Mariscal with the LFA. He gets that win. He fights on Contender Series against Diego Lopes and decides, Let's poke him in the eye a couple of times. The eye poke ends it in the third round, and there hadn't been any strikes to that point. So a rare 10-10 third round, less a point. So ultimately, it is 29-28 across the board. Lopes getting that third round, but the round 1, round 2, Joanderson, Britio, excellent with the takedowns, but he goes buck wild for them. And we saw Britio on the regional scene against fighters like Wellington Prado, Andy Iwasaki. Brito had to rally in those fights because it was the takedown abilities and the overall scrambles that showed that his opponents could get one up on him. Now, I know Brito, his last 2 times out, I mean, a performance bonus scrambled in there. He beats he beats Lucas Alexandr, both of those in the first round. It wouldn't surprise me if Joanderson Brito won this fight in the first round because Westin Wilson, sidewinder, southpaw, karate stance, and I don't know if it's because Wonder Boy's coaching Conor McGregor's team in The Ultimate Fighter. Hey, you're going to stick around for this practice, right? As Conor's going to the door, and then he has to turn back around.
Polar opposite personalities.
Conor McGregor, do you really want to be a part of this show, or do you just want to go to games?
He doesn't want to enter USADA.
But when you look at a matchup like this, I mean, Brito is going to be heavily favored in the matchup. We have a look at the Topology votes. Surprise us there to you. I'm going to say over under 90% Brito here.
I'll say over.
I'm going to say over. It's 96% over with 75% taking him to win by knockout. So I do have Joanderson Brito in the fight. I think Westin Wilson's a fun fighter, but guys like Will Chope, guys like Cole Miller, they had places in the UFC. They were able to get finished. Will Chope, no, because he only had the one fight against Max Holloway. But yeah, Cole Miller is up there for submissions in the UFC. But I look at a guy like Westin Wilson, I could just see him getting cracked by Brito. And if you watch that Chepe Mariscal fight, getting ready for last weekend's fight, you know what Brito can do. Find your balls and drop you dead.
I have Brito in this fight. He's just in a different space in the division. Like, this is a difficult matchup for Westin Wilson. I will say this, though, because I brought it up earlier. I don't think he has a large margin to get this win, but Brito fights in such a wild way. It's like brawling with John Lineker, right? You're probably going to get knocked out. Probably. But the way he fights means that you're going to be able to land a counter shot every now and then. You can make it interesting. So if Wilson was able to land one of those little inside power shots on Brito that could completely change the complexion of this fight, I'm going to be the first person to tell you I could see it happen, but I still have Brito in the matchup.
Both of us going with Brazil's own, Shoot the Box's own, formerly of Atos BJJ, with Davi Ramos, Joanderson Brito to get the win. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have in the matchup. Some big-time fights on this card, including Yana Santos sticking on Karol Rosa. You're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.